If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the views of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliates or sponsors.
Hello and welcome to another edition of The More Show, which is sponsored by the UFO Matrix magazine. On today's show, I'm about to be joined by my guest, Gerard Aartsen. Now, Gerard has been a student of the Ageless Wisdom teaching for over 30 years. He has a master's degree from the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands, where he has held a teaching position in the Department of Secondary Education since 2001. Gerard Aartsen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be on the show.
Now, Gerard, for our UK audience, just tell me a bit about your background to begin with.
Well, by profession, I'm a teacher. After I worked as a translator for a long time. And at the same time, I've been studying the Ageless Wisdom teachings, as they are called, which have come to humanity through people like Madame Blavatsky, Alexander Bailey, Benjamin Creme, and various others. I've recently written a book about Gerrard Aartsen, in which I link his claims and his teachings with the teachings of the Ageless Wisdom.
So, just to begin with then, tell us a bit about your latest book.
My latest book is also my first book, and it's called Gerard Aartsen, A Herald for the Space Brothers. And I set out to because what made me write the book was when I found out that Gerard Aartsen did not just write 3 books that he's most known about flying saucers, but his very first book from 1936 was called The Wisdom of the Masters of the Far East. And there I had an immediate link with the teachings that I've been studying for so long. And I wanted to know more about that. And at first I thought maybe he was influenced or inspired by other books. For instance, you may have heard of Bertie Spalding's Life and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East, very popular from when it first came out and still in print. But I couldn't find any link there, and just researching, I came across various sources which claimed that Adamski went to Tibet, was sent to Tibet actually as a teenager. And he was trained there not only in spirituality and meditation, but also as in preparation for his later task to inform the world about the reality of the flying saucers and the people from space.
Let's just look into Adamski right now. There was a lot of criticism against the man, wasn't there, in his later life?
He was defiled. He was ridiculed to no end. There was no end to the debunking that went on, and to put him down and to make people disbelieve whatever he said. It's just incredible and immense in that respect what happened to him, and very, very criminal. He claimed, most people will have heard of, if they're interested in UFOs, of his books, Flying Saucers Have Landed, which he co-wrote with Desmond Leslie. Actually, Desmond Leslie wrote a historic overview of the UFO phenomenon, going all the way back to the ancient Indian scriptures about the Vimanas in the Mahabharata, etc. Adamski's part was added after Desmond Leslie heard about his encounter, Adamski's encounter in the California desert in 1952 with a UFO and a person coming out of that UFO, and he had a brief interaction with that space person. So when Leslie heard about that, he decided to add it to his book, and that sort of made it an overnight sensation when it came out in 1953. It was followed in 1955 by a book that Adamski wrote himself with help inside the spaceship, but it was about Adamski's own personal experiences aboard motherships, as he calls them, that transport the smaller saucers between the planets. And after that, he wrote one more book about flying saucers, which is Flying Saucers Farewell. It came out in 1961. And after his popularity grew to such an extent in the 1950s, especially after the publication of his second book, Inside the Spaceships, it seems the authorities got really seriously worried, and they went all out to defame him and to ridicule him. And it was amazing because what I didn't know before I started researching him, I knew he was world famous because his book had been translated in at least a dozen languages. But he also went on a speaking tour. For instance, it took him to South America, to Australia, New Zealand, or Europe in 1959, and again in the early 60s to many countries. And the things that he was saying sparked such interest in people that the establishment was afraid that that people would no longer put up with the status quo. We must remember this was the time of the Cold War.
Yes,
the United States and their allies were in a standoff with the Soviets and their allies, and people were living under a psychological threat. I mean, I was born in 1957, but I still remember that threat lingering on in the 1960s. Where you grow up with alarms going off in the streets every first Monday of the month to test if we can be warned in time if the Russians are coming. And of course, people were looking not just for relief from that tension, from that stress, but they were looking for a different way of life as well. And Adamski, through his experiences, his contacts, in his book showed that there were other ways of going about building a human society without competition and division. So that's the main reason why he was he had character assassination committed on himself.
I mean, do you believe that there was any sort of disinformation brought about by himself, perhaps?
I don't have any reason to believe that. If you look closely at the things that he has said, then most of it, almost everything that he said, chimes in with the teachings that we have received through the people that I mentioned earlier, and those teachings, the core of those teachings can be found in every major religion on earth. So when he talks about the need for harmlessness, the fact of the brotherhood of man, not just on this planet, but on every planet throughout the universe. That's exactly the same thing you find in the major religions and in the teachings of the Ageless Wisdom. There may have been instances where he didn't have all the information, and there may have been instances where perhaps he made mistakes, but I have no reason to believe that he willingly or consciously misinformed people.
So, for example, then, what did Adamski say about our local solar system and, planet Saturn as well?
Yes, yeah, that's a famous episode where he claimed that he went on a 3-day conference on the planet Saturn. But I think the important thing is what he says about life. He says life is not a freak accident because of the coming together of certain chemical elements on this planet. Life is universal, he says. And as I said, that's you can find the same tenet, the same premise in the teachings that originated on this planet. He says that his contacts came from planets like Mars and Venus and Saturn and other planets in the solar system. Of course, at the time, there was still a lot of excitement among the general population and among scientists, because the first space probes were going out, were sent into space, and we were getting readings back that seemed to show that life as we know it here is not possible on those planets because of the physical conditions. And Adamski famously insisted that his contacts were from those planets. Now, the Ageless Wisdom teaching says that life on other planets doesn't necessarily take place on the same dense physical plane as it does here on planet Earth. According to the teachings, there are 4 higher levels of material reality, which we cannot see with our solid physical eyes, but which are material nonetheless. And they're called the levels of, the planes of ether. There's four levels of them above the dense physical, the liquid physical, and the gaseous physical that our science knows and acknowledges. And it is on those higher levels of matter where the things drop out of our range of vision because the higher frequency of the atoms on those levels. But we must remember that the discovery by Wilhelm Reich, for instance, of the orgone energy is exactly of those levels of matter. The efforts that scientists are now making in the Large Hadron Collider in CERN in Switzerland are to do with trying to prove the existence of levels of matter or particles that they know must exist, and that they say 96% of the universe consists of, but they have not been able to measure yet with their instruments. So, and it is on those levels that life on the other planets in our solar system exists.
So are we talking about then different dimensional kind of beings, perhaps?
Well, you could call them dimensions, but in fact they're just higher planes of material reality. But whether you call them dimensions or not, I don't think that's really material, not really important. But if a UFO, you will have heard of many UFO sightings where suddenly something appears in the sky, or when something has been spotted and observed for a while, it seems to sometimes disappear into thin air. And that's just a matter of the craft or the people in the craft raising or lowering, as the case may be, the rate of vibration of their atoms. And as soon as they go back to the normal frequency, they disappear from our sight.
So, again, these could be existing in our very own solar system.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what Adamski said. That's what the teachings say, because life is not an accident, but it's a universal principle. And life expresses itself through the evolution of consciousness. And that takes place throughout the universe. There's no reason to assume why it would be on an isolated planet somewhere on the fringe of our galaxy only. It's a universal occurrence. It's just sad for us that most of us do not have etheric vision. There are increasingly people who do have etheric vision, and they can see, for instance, spirits of people who have passed away, or other phenomena. Another example I could give of a scientist who has been touching on that same concept of the planes of etheric matter is, even though he may not acknowledge it when you ask him, but the work of Rupert Sheldrake, morphogenetic fields, also touches on the same notion of there being planes levels where the blueprints exist for any living thing, any object, in fact. And he's gone a long way in proving that his hypothesis in experiments.
Let's go back to George Adamski's sort of pathway here. Okay, you've spoken about the time in the Middle East, which at the beginning part of researching George, you was totally unaware that he had this sort of spiritual sort of beginning in his life. Well, just tell us a bit more about the Middle East wisdom that he studied.
Well, I think you mean the wisdom of the masters of the Far East in Tibet, not rather than the Middle East. He was a teenager, and there is very little known about his sojourn in Tibet. Some sources say he was there 3 years, others say he was there for 6 years. I was surprised to learn that he actually went to Tibet at that time, because this was the last couple of years of the 19th century and the turn of the century into the 20th century when he was there. As a teenager, he was born in 1891, so maybe it was just the beginning of the 20th century when Tibet was very much an isolated kingdom of Buddhist priests, and hardly anybody managed to get in there, with a few exceptions, and those few exceptions are just as famous as Adamski is. So even less is known about exactly what he did there. But the book that he wrote about what he learned, The Wisdom of the Masters of the Far East, that came out in 1936, is really a gem of and basically a summary of what you could read in major works such as Madame Blavatsky's The Secret Doctrine or Isis Unveiled, in very accessible language, very understandable. He makes the concepts, universal concepts, very clear in that book. And therefore, I took some pages in my book that I wrote about him to summarize what he wrote in that book, because it's really a gem of wisdom.
So obviously, Adamski was a very spiritual man, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. Even though his, the attempts to defile him made him. I suppose that's what made him decide to insist that the people that he met and the craft that he went on were mechanical and physical, which they are, except they are on etheric matter, and really they are just as physical as anything that we know, except on a slightly higher rate of vibration. But he wanted to prevent people from thinking that he was talking about spirits or things like that.
So, what race did make contact with Adamski initially?
Well, he has had contact with people from Venus, from Mars, from Saturn that I know of, and Jupiter, I believe. And he doesn't talk about really strange physical features. He describes them as normal-looking people, some a bit shorter in posture, others much taller, but looking perfectly human, except for he describes actually in his book Inside the Spaceships that there are some racial differences, just as we find them here on Earth. Some people are white, either are black or yellow, and he says you have similar differences on other planets. So, but he doesn't talk about reptilians or rays or anything like that.
So where does his work fit in with Roswell then?
Well, Roswell actually was, and this is information that I got from Benjamin Creme's book, who is one of the people who have been elaborating on the Ageless Wisdom teaching for, I think almost 35 years now. And Benjamin Creme says that the Roswell incident was actually deliberate sacrifice on the part of the crew from Mars who crashed the ship there in the New Mexico area around Roswell to allow our scientists to have physical proof of their existence. So they sacrificed themselves, their lives, deliberately, so that our scientists would have the evidence of their craft and their bodies. And this, of course, happened in early July. It was part of a huge effort on the part of the space people to get humanity to get accustomed to the notion that there's life out there, and that we're not alone in the universe, and that there are people who are concerned about us and about how careless we seem to be with our planet, our own home, through the pollution and the nuclear power that we use and abuse, with very much disregard, actually, for the health of the planet.
But again, though, Gerard, these weren't the normal-looking sort of species that Adamski had been visited by. These were quite separate-looking individuals, weren't they, as such?
Of course, I've seen the footage, and they may seem slightly, different in body shape, but they had a head and four limbs in around the same places where we have our limbs. I wouldn't really say they're that much different looking from us. I think the important thing is that they have been attempting ever since World War II and the invention of nuclear fission technology to let us know, even in spite of all the best efforts of the authorities to cover it up, that they are here. And Adamski set up a worldwide network of correspondents, which he called the Get Acquainted program. Some similar efforts were going on, I learned recently, in Italy and other European countries that did not have direct contact with George Adamski, but where hundreds of Italians, in this case, were allowed access to underground bases of the space people from 1956 onwards, running all the way into the late 1970s, and that was called the Friendship Case. And it also had branches in South America. So I think the importance of Adamski's message is, and of the correspondences with the other contact cases, is that the space people are here. From all the evidence that we have, the real evidence, if you listen to the dignitaries, the officials that come forward and go on the record after many years sometimes, the evidence that we have is that they're not here to conquer anything. They're not here to abduct people or mistreat us or to colonize us. They are here to help.
Okay, and have they always been here? I mean, why the sudden interest in the 40s?
I think that is to do with as I said, the invention of the nuclear fission technology, and the fact that the world has really been on the brink ever since, especially through the Cold War standoff, because the divisions, the artificial divisions that separate man from man, that allow for millions of people to die of hunger, for lack of the food that's rotting in the warehouses around the world, the inhumane rule of the market as we have allowed it, especially in the last 30 years, the deep divisions have made the world a really dangerous place, along with the invention of the atom bomb. So that is, I think, the reason why the space people have decided that it's time that we learn that there's other life out there. Another thing that that is really most important is that the world, humanity, has come to the point where we are reawakening to the spiritual realities of life.
Well, before we get on to that, obviously we're going to go down that path and talk about the spiritual side of all this in quite some detail. Why, in your opinion, have they not made contact before? Why have they sort of, okay, you say there that there was one particular species, maybe, that sacrificed itself to sort of, bring the truth out, and I suppose all we did was compartmentalize it and, keep it as a secret, but then maybe the technology has made its way into the modern day technology that we have today, just the bare basics of it. But why have they not just come out and said, look, here we are? Is that the sign of a spiritually advanced race to not make its presence known and sort of, land outside the capital as such?
Well, I suppose there's two ways going about it. I think it is the sign of a spiritually advanced race that they have done everything in their power to try and show themselves without infringing our free will. They have appeared to, I think, literally millions of people around the planet. They have crashed some of their saucers. They have contacted many governments. They have done all kinds of things, and even to a very great extent in the last couple of years, where you see whole fleets, sometimes over cities, major cities, so that hundreds of people can see them. So it's not for lack of effort on their part, but they respect something that most of us here on Earth disrespect every day and disregard, and very often don't even think about that it's something so basic and so important. And that's our free will. Neither the space people nor the masters of wisdom will ever infringe our free will. The recognition of the higher dimensions of life has to come from us, from within, and they'll do everything within, the law, as it's called, that they can, to allow us to recognize those higher dimensions. But if we allow our scientists to deny our own personal experience, if we allow our governments or military or corporate interests to deny what everybody, in their right mind would have to recognize, that there are alien craft or crafts from outside Earth that can only be flown by intelligent control. Then that's our responsibility. They're doing everything in their power to show themselves. The shows, the aerial shows that they're giving, are becoming ever more spectacular. And when there is this blue spiral over Norway, for instance, which could only, I think, have been maybe there are other explanations, but the explanation that we have been given in the media from our authorities, that it was a failed missile launch from the Russians. When is the last time we've heard of missiles that were designed in such a way as to look like Chinese fireworks when they fail? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up.
You would say, in your opinion, we're being hidden from the sort of biggest truth of mankind, which is, we are not alone. We've never been alone.
Exactly, and they have visited us before, but perhaps before, say, the Christian era. There are numerous accounts in older scriptures of, and even in the Old Testament, I believe, of people from space contacting us and communicating, interacting with us. And the fact that they're here now is because, as I said, humanity's reawakening to the spiritual realities of life, and this time is so historic. It's so crucial in the history of mankind and our development, our evolution, because the masters of wisdom who have been living behind the scenes, so to speak, in remote mountain and desert areas since the destruction of Atlantis, basically, they are now re-emerging into our lives and taking up their places in the world again. This has started actually since 1945 as well, and the UFOs are here in support of that event. Many people seem to think that the coming of the UFOs is an event in itself, and they are just here in support, because they would never do anything to influence the evolution on Earth, the natural course of events on this planet, in a negative way, and for their own benefit. They're only here in support.
So why are people being abducted then?
Well, maybe they aren't, and if they are, maybe they're not being abducted by the UFOs. We know, and I've documented this much in my book, how much Gerrard Aartsen and all of the other early contactees, not abductees, but contactees, have been ridiculed, etc., by the authorities. And attempts have been made to bribe them into saying, well, this wasn't real, this was science fiction, etc. And Adamski, of course, is the most famous case of someone who insisted that his experiences were real. And the interesting thing is, you will not find any of the early contactees saying that they have been abducted. And if you look at the statements from officials, dignitaries, whether they are astronauts or people who are in those nuclear missile silos, or even Pope John the 23rd, no one has ever said anything about being abducted. There's a famous case of the president of the southern Russian state or Republic of Kalmykia, Kirsan Ilyumzhinov. He was also the head of the World Chess Federation, FIDE. And he says he was invited onto a ship, given a tour of the ship. I think they took him to some other part of the planet, and the whole experience took about 24 hours. And not once does he talk about being abducted, because he was invited and he wasn't abducted. And of course, there are, I don't know how many hundreds, thousands of people now who say they have been abducted. And I believe that if, the authorities have been able to do what they've done in terms of, denying the experience of the contactees and ridiculing them and covering up all the evidence that's there, I believe they're also capable of giving people abduction experiences, memories, maybe implanting memories or drug-induced or hypnosis-induced experiences, and the people from space that are allowed to come out to our planet are only the people who are evolved far enough to help us.
Okay. So you use the word there, evolve, and I suppose, would you say that that's what, as a conscious shift that's going on right now, would you say that we are evolving spiritually? And because of that, where do you think this conscious shift is going to take us as we sort of enter this new era of Piscean era? Is it the end of the
I would say an era of
Aquarius,
of brotherhood and synthesis. Yeah, the age of Aquarius, that's what it's been called, of course, and it will be an era of brotherhood, recognized brotherhood, practical brotherhood, and unity and synthesis, because we will come to a recognition of the fact that life is one, with, of course, with the conclusion, the only possible conclusion, that humanity is one, and that we have to act on that realization. When the Masters of Wisdom, and that's really important to understand. When the Masters of Wisdom re-emerge into the world and have taken up their places, and with them at their head, the master of all the masters, who is called the world teacher, we will, that will, within a few years from now, according to Benjamin Creme, we will have a very profound experience on the day when that will become known. The Masters of Wisdom are people like us, but they have gone ahead of us in evolution. Life is about an evolution, the evolution of consciousness. Of course, we know the evolution of the physical form, the different kingdoms in nature, and Darwin has documented most of that process. But the evolution of the form is only there to facilitate the evolution of consciousness. And from the human consciousness, from the human kingdom has evolved the spiritual kingdom. In church terms, we would call it the kingdom of souls, and that's occupied by the masters and the initiates of wisdom. And everybody on this planet goes through the same process of evolution and ends up as member of that kingdom. If you think of the great names in history, whether they are considered now founders of religion, of course, they themselves would never see themselves as such. But people like Krishna or Buddha or Christ, Muhammad, but also great composers or painters or scientists, inventors, they were all masters or initiates in the wisdom tradition. And those masters have inspired and guided humanity throughout our history. From behind the scenes, since Atlantis was destroyed, and they are now at the time they have come to a point in their evolution as a kingdom, and humanity has come to a point in our own evolution where it is important that the two are, come back in contact with each other again, and will be moving forward together, openly known to each other. Of course, the masters know about us, but most of humanity doesn't know about the masters. And it is that event which is taking place now. There are 14 masters in the world already, according to the information from Benjamin Creme. And it is that event that will make us realize that all life is interconnected. There is not one atom, even in the universe, that is not connected with any other atom in the universe, literally. And through that recognition, through that profound experience, which we will be given on the day when the world teacher will make himself known, will make known to the world that he and his group of masters have returned to the world, we will realize that we are brothers and sisters all around the world. And it is a crime against humanity for any of us to deny anybody the basic needs of food, shelter, education, healthcare, etc., as is happening now, unfortunately, because of the structures that are now in place. But fortunately, we can also see that those same structures are gradually and faster, in fact, crumbling and falling apart. Nothing seems to work anymore. The economy, the political systems, education, everything that we built up in our civilization over the past 2,000 years under the influence of the energies coming from the constellation of Pisces, everything is crumbling because those energies have been withdrawing for the last couple of 100 years, while the new energies from Aquarius have not yet, we have not yet built the structures through which those energies can be expressed.
Sure.
And this is what creates all the tension in the world, and this is what we need to understand. and this is what we need to put into practice. Once we understand that humanity is one, then the stress, the tension will subside, will disappear, trust will take its place, and this whole process will be supported by the people from space, and it will help us realize that indeed we are not unique on this planet. We are not the kings of the crown of creation. We are very important, but still just a clearinghouse of consciousness, one stage in the evolution of consciousness. And there's huge avenues of evolution beyond the human stage.
Okay, so I mean, some people would say though that systems, for example, the economy has its ups and downs. Are you saying the particular crisis that we're in now is sort of pinnacle to this time of change, though? Are you pinpointing all these worldwide events, for example, the Middle East collapse and the breakdown of regimes, as part of this, pinnacle time of change? Or is it just, give it a couple of years and we'll be back to our normal selves?
Well, I think, yes, that's a very, very pertinent question. And I think if you look at recent history, you will see that we have been through crisis after crisis, and we've bounced back, it seems. But increasingly, the crises get worse and more frequent. And I think you're absolutely right. It is to do with the fact that the structures, as I've said, are crumbling. They no longer serve our needs. They are based on competition and greed and division. And they've divided humanity in rich and poor, in different religions and different ways of looking at the world. And if you just look at attempts to form governments in the past 2-3 years, you have in the UK now a unique situation with the first coalition government for the first time in 100 years. In Holland, we have a government that can only govern because of the support of some right-wing party who doesn't want to be part of the government. The similar situation exists in Denmark. In America, society and politics seems to be split down the middle, with opposing sides in equal strength and force. The same situation seems to pertain in Australia. So everything is coming to a head, whether it's politics, economics, the banking crisis, the credit crisis that is still said to be almost over, is going to deepen and is now developing into a national debt crisis. That's because the structures just don't work anymore, and we need to and it will help us. It will help bring us to the point where we realize, wait a second, we cannot go on like this, polluting the planet, polluting the very habitat that we depend on for our lives, for our subsistence, to an extent that boggles the mind. So all for what? For the moment, it's all for love of money and more money. But the money isn't going anywhere because millions of people are dying.
So, how do other planets make this work then out there? What did Adamski say of the structures that they have in place? I mean, do they just go and do any job they'd like? I mean, how does their policies work? How do their money? Do they have such thing as monetary? You said there that the biggest crime against humanity is towards itself, with not looking after the starving and the needy. How do they make a planet work?
Adamski does say a couple of things about that. And I've quoted him on various points. But I think the most important thing we need to remember is that every planet has its own destiny to fulfill. So it's not about looking at how people on Venus or Mars are dealing with this. It's about, we have to find our own way. But there are a few basic cosmic principles. And those principles are the need for harmlessness, once we realize that life is one. When you realize that life is one, you will understand, and that every atom and every person, therefore, because we're just atoms at a slightly higher level of complexity, is interconnected. We will also understand the need for harmlessness, and that we must do everything in our power to prevent divisions to exist. Of course, there will always be differences, because it's not about creating some kind of Brave New World, where nobody is allowed their own individuality. The whole can only exist through each individual's contribution, and the whole can only be enriched if everybody is a uniquely individual expression of life. So what we need to do is realize that we're all brothers and sisters. Everybody needs to be given the opportunity to develop themselves, to contribute to human society, and the one thing that we first must do, of course, is to act on that realization and make sure that everybody has the opportunity, that everybody's been given at least the basic necessities for life, and from there on, it's up to us. We have already in place the United Nations organization. Of course, that's been hijacked more or less by the major powers, economic powers, political, military powers, through the Security Council. But if we get rid of the Security Council, the UN could very well function as a world parliament, where every nation has an equal voice, and where conflicts or points of contest can be discussed in a humane, in a civil manner, and things do not need to be solved always on the spot. Sometimes they may take a while, and the discussion may go back and forth, but it's important to reach a consensus, especially when you understand the need for harmlessness. Not trying to solve conflict through war or violence, but through the understanding of the fact that we're all in this together, and there's the only way of evolving together is by allowing each and every one of us, individuals, nations, groups of nations, continents, races, to express ourselves. On other planets, Adamski has said, they don't use money. There is no monetary system. He has said that on Venus, people work, but it's only a few hours a week that they have to work, because their society so far evolved that they have a lot of things that do the work for them. Whole factories where robots are creating the artifacts of life, and people don't need to work for 40 hours a week for just to make a living. Instead, a lot of people try to understand their own nature, their divine nature. They go around the universe, especially the solar system, but sometimes also beyond, to understand more of it. And because we are of our origin is in the universe, they travel around. Adamski says people are the same everywhere. They love to travel. They love to learn from new places and other people that they meet.
I've got to say, Gerard, everything that you've explained so far sounds very much like Gene Roddenberry's concept in Star Trek. The Federation, the different species. I mean, I suppose people have, seen this in their culture. This what you're explaining.
Yes, and it's actually a deeply human desire to live like that, to live in peace. Nobody in the right mind would want a war, except maybe for a few people who think they can make profit out of it. But of the majority of people, the masses, nobody in the right mind would want war or conflict.
But don't you think the problem is, though, Gerard, that you talk about this oneness, but there's a lot of people who would turn around and say, well, unless you can, scientifically prove that life continues after death, unless and most people as well, want the proof in front of the face that there's life out there and everything else that goes with it. Mm-hmm. This whole oneness that you speak about as well. Do people actually, are people ready for that? I mean, I meet there's a lot of angry people out there right now. And,
Yes.
are they spiritually ready for the change?
I think the anger shows, in a way, is evidence that they are ready because we are the anger comes from people running into that brick wall because our existing structures don't allow them to go further, to see beyond, and I think the proof will be for most people undeniable when on the day when the world teacher makes himself known and introduces to the world the masters of wisdom, of which he is the head. Benjamin Creme said he will overshadow at the same time all of humanity.
Well, who is this? Who is this?
He will come on TV.
Sure, go
Sorry?
ahead. Go ahead. You go on TV. Go ahead.
Okay, Benjamin Creme is one in a line of disciples of the masters. I've mentioned Madame Blavatsky, who gave the world the secret doctrine and Isis Unveiled. Alice Ann Bailey elaborated on that in 19 books, which were dictated to her by one of the masters. Benjamin Creme has started 35 odd years ago to introduce to the world the fact that this whole return of what's called our elder brothers, the spiritual hierarchy, is now about to happen. And he has said that the world teacher, the head of the spiritual hierarchy, whose personal name is Maitreya, will come on one of these days. He's just started last year with a series of interviews in the United States. He's since been interviewed on Mexican television also, and this will go around the world in the coming few years and culminate in a TV broadcast where he will overshadow all of humanity at the same time, everyone over the age of 14. And he will, at that time, we will hear his words. He will talk to us about 15-20 minutes, and we will see his face on TV, but we will not see his lips move as he speaks to us. So we will receive his thoughts, his words in our brains, and so you will hear him in English. As a native Dutch speaker, I will hear him in Dutch, the French will hear him in French, the Chinese in Chinese, the Russians in Russian, etc., etc. And during that 15 or 20 minutes, he will not only give us an overview of the spiritual heights from which we've come and the gross materialism to which we've descended, but also the enormous way we've gone through evolution already and the avenues that are awaiting us. He will introduce to us not only the masters of wisdom, probably also the people from space, the whole notion of that, and give us at the same time an experience. He will let us experience that we are all one, that we are all brothers and sisters, and he said that it will be almost physical, as we can feel the love, because he embodies the love aspect of the cosmic energies on this planet. It will be as if I embrace you. And at the same time, hundreds of thousands of miraculous healings will take place. And that is how we will be sure that he is in fact the master of all the masters, the world teacher. And that is why the UFOs are here now, in support of that event. And that is the proof humanity will be given that we are one, and that there is a way out of our problems.
Well, this has been a fascinating interview, I've got to say that much. And I'm so glad I got you onto my show. What would you want the core message of your work to be right now, Gerard?
I think the core message of what I'm doing, of what I've written about in my first book, and what I will be writing about even more in my second book, is that the coming of the UFOs is not an event in itself, but is happening in support of the most climactic change in human history that people could imagine. It is more profound than, but at the same time more hopeful and inspiring than most people in the UFO community would think.
Where can people find out more information about your work?
I have a website, www.bgapublications.nl. It's in English. My book is available on Amazon, any Amazon site around the world. There's the Dutch edition has been out for a while, and people have been working on German, Spanish, and Japanese translations, but it's not yet clear when they will be published. So yes, that's where they can find out. I write regularly still, of course, about the extraterrestrial presence and the implications for life on Earth. And I'm currently working on my new book. Yes, that's it, I believe.
Okay, and people can catch you in the UK in the next few weeks, can't they? Or next week, shall I say?
Yes, I'll be speaking at the Leeds Exopolitics Expo in Leeds on the 7th of August. The conference will be from the 5th to the 7th of August, and I'll be speaking on the 7th. And I'll also be speaking in Edinburgh on the 9th of August. And more details can be found on my website.
Well, Gerard, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
To find out more information on Gerard Aartsen, just go to my website, which is themoreshow.co.uk, and look up Gerard Aartsen under past guests. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter to get the latest updates on the show. And we have a TV show which goes out on Sky 201 and FreeSat 403 every Friday at 6 p.m. Again, you can find out more information on the website. So until next time, thanks for listening.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.